This is Viewpoints' collaborative show. It's called Reaching Out. A small group of artists have reached out into their community to someone they identify with, and the art you see is a result of that collaboration. It may be a family member, someone that they know personally, or someone in the community, and the art is as unique as that collaboration.
Ted and I have been together for 38 years, and when we got together, we had both had occupations and vocations that did not make us happy.
Well, it wasn't there was so much unhappy, we just said when we got together we were not going to do anything we didn't enjoy doing. And so we have accomplished that for 38 years, and this is just the latest adventure for the last 12 to 13 years. And so for me, entering a new, I guess, career, if you will, in the art world is something totally different from things that I had done previously.
I decided to ask Ted because of all of our other businesses that we had done. We had worked together and managed not to kill each other, which is always a good outcome for a project or a job. And I have such respect for the wood work that he has done that we thought, why don't we combine some of the woodwork that he's, different techniques and ideas, and we drew out sketches and figured out how to incorporate and frame out pieces of clay and pieces of wood and stain them and finish them, and I put glazes on. And this is a different slant on dawn to dusk, taking what we would see of the island of Lanai. From the minute the sun hits it, has warm copper tones, and then when the sun sets behind it, picks up the blue, and then turned it on its side and hung it on the wall. So as you walk towards this piece this way, it's all warm tones and earth tones, but as you walk towards it this way, it's all blues and grays and soft colors. And just a transition of where it would be as you would walk past it. You feel one way and you walk past it the other way and you feel the other way.
The vertical structures is a Philippine mahogany, and it's very dense wood. In fact, I use several saw blades cutting the darn stuff. It's so dense. In the meantime, I was a great fan of letting the wood, colors of the wood be natural, so I just use a very clear varnish, if you will, to put a coating on them, and that enhanced the grain. So we're doing that, and there's several coats on it, each one hand rubbed out between, so there's no bumps on it whatsoever, no graininess, grit. And then had to make a division, if I may point, using this, and had some grain, and that is a fir, and use that, and just did have to stain that to get some color to enhance that. So joining it together are dowel rods, and that's holding everything together with some good glue. And we love the ability of clamps to hold everything together and squeeze it in to make an integral piece of it. And the thought was to, with a combination of different lengths, obviously to make this not totally symmetrical, but somewhat so there was a flow. And from one side to the other, the verticality of it made it flow to make it somewhat of we think, an interesting piece to hang on the wall.
And then for the ceramic part, I had to work within the parameters of the design that we set up and make pieces to fit in each slot. They had to stand vertically, so firing them was, let's see, what's the word for it? A nightmare?
Yeah.
Because I had to prop them up. Bisque, not so bad because they didn't, I had to stand them up, but I could put pieces against them. In the gas kiln with the glaze on them, I had to support them way down low. So there were several pieces, and I did make extras, but there were several pieces that just went like this. And once clay does that, that's forever. So those went by the wayside. Unfortunately, I had enough extra pieces that we were able to do the entire structure. On each of these pieces, on the top half inch, I used a red iron oxide on one side and cobalt carb on the other. And because they stood vertically, the glaze that I applied to both sides was another, because I had to prop them up and spray them. I couldn't just dip them, I had to prop them up and spray them, and then make sure that the glaze wasn't touching anything else in the kiln. And that was very complicated, but the glaze that I used covers the oxide, but lets the oxide come through, so you see the copper color through the glaze. The copper's on the clay, and then the glaze goes over it, but the copper comes through, and then it slides down. Lets the iron oxide particles and the cobalt just slide down the side. So it has a beautiful, and here too, it works with gravity, which is why I couldn't do these any other position than standing up, so the glaze would behave the way I wanted it to. And then when we decided to do the second piece, it was an idea that I came up with that didn't involve the wood at all, but involved the same concept that the two of us had discussed of having the ridges and the ripples, but instead this time we made it a three-dimensional. I made it a three-dimensional piece and have a separate base, the large bowl, another base, the smaller, and then the little floret in the center, with the same concept. When you look at it from the side, you see the earth tones. When you look down in, it's brilliant blue and heavenly and earthly. Is reaching out from the bamboo forest. And that piece, we laughed the whole time we were working on it. We just thought it was so, because we've all wandered into that bamboo forest and gone a little further than you should and go, oh, now what? I immediately envisioned bamboo and hands saying, let me out of here, or help me find a way out, or grab my hand and pull me out, or I've gotten this far, I think I can get the rest of the way. And I immediately had that idea. It was how to do it and get the bamboo and get the right sizes, and Ted used his skills to figure out how to fasten them all together.
But the bamboo, I just love the characteristics of it, and because we've had it for, I think, 12 years now.
In the garden.
Bamboo in the garden, we have good diameter, a good caliper of it, so it really made it very effective with the ceramic. And part of the reaching out, it's almost a Hawaiian tradition, because if you think of all the things that have been built with stone and rock and handed for miles and miles and miles to build fortresses and places of safety, this is reaching out, and so we think that we're all reaching for something better, if you will, and this is part of that feeling. So we're very fond of that attitude.
Things change when new artwork comes into the world. Things change. We change to reflect having the knowledge and the experience. We now know we can actually do this and both come out unharmed. And it was really fun. It was really fun.
There is the point that before this I did have a full head of hair. So let us understand.
The project, or our part of the project or of this exhibition, my thoughts came about of where I am in my life and my artwork, and it went to the desire to try to make some changes. And I thought the best way for me, something to look into, was to go down to the Dharma Center down in Paia, where the stupa is, and Lama Gelson, and chat with them. With that said, I felt a little bit that I was in a little bit of chaos, that I bounced from project to project and so forth, and I thought this was a great opportunity to incorporate thoughts, maybe some Buddhist techniques, some meditation, and work that through myself and into my art. A lot of the work that I do deals with portals, with forms that have some spiritual nature and the feminine form. And as I looked deeper into it and progressed with that, I found that bringing in Leigh Koprowski to work with me on that, who also does quite a bit with the feminine form, butterflies, which has that metamorphosis or that growth or that intangible part would help bring more out in me. She's a dedicated artist who I admire so much, and I'm hoping that some of that will rub off, as this project is not just about this exhibition for me, but is for more lifestyle change and to carry on with some of the things I've learned while doing it. So that's kind of where it started. Loma Gelson was looking at me as I talked. I think he thinks I'm a crazy person, but he knows I'm an artist, so that was great. And what kind of evolved with it was more, every time I would go there, he wasn't there, or he was there, I would walk the stupa. And that became more my mantra and my calming thing that I think is really going to be the residual part that's going to carry on as the project goes forward.
Of course, well, Tim and I have been friends for quite a while. We've both admired each other's work greatly for years. The feminine form, the female, is definitely my influence in all my work. I'm an oil painter and focus on that. My inspiration on Maui is, of course, from lifestyle, from the windsurfing, the kiting, the running, walking in the ocean, just being from the yoga, the dance, and just being part of nature here, but also the feminine form and just what being a woman, there's strength, vulnerability, power, and the butterflies are definitely a sense of metamorphosis for me, a change, and also a freedom. That's why I had fun doing these, particularly with this project, because Tim, we talked about wood, and this is not my medium, but when you're given work or we're talking about it, you're trying to think what you can do that still resonates to you and your medium on someone else's medium. And then I saw the pieces of wood and really thought how we could work towards this. And I had to practice quite a bit with the carving. I had done a bit of this in college, playing with it. And then talking about the silver, which is a big part of my work. When I do paint, I use silver a lot in my butterflies. And of course, with this particular piece, I do have butterflies very much coming out of the female form. And when I saw this layout in this form and where certain parts of the wood and the organic pieces of the wood were part of, I thought, oh, we're going to do a little bit edgier piece. Whether people get that or not, it definitely resonates with my paintings, with my work, with Tim, feminine, a little bit masculine with the type of wood and more of the, I think, square areas. And then of course we had the natural wood here with the butterfly, which we saw, this looked like a wing right off the bat. But we didn't want to make that so obvious again too, so tried to keep that very subtle with a sense, if people know my work, they may get the feel of it a little bit more, but we also wanted something very elegant. We wanted to keep it contemporary.
And with the show, with Walking the Stupa, you know, the two titles of the piece, this is View Behind the Silver Lining. So basically, abstract, the form of the woman peeking through. Silver is such a unique color that she used in it, and I love it. And I think the reflections that you get when you move around it, going back with the theme, the view looking through the silver lining is looking forward, is progressing, is transformation. And with the butterflies and the feminine form in this one, I think it's just so fitting. I think her carving just really nailed it. And this beautiful piece of Mila wood really, it's such a rarity to see it so big. And I think that fits with what we're doing there. This one, Beautiful Chaos, as she said, really fitting for my life, because the portal is the transformal here with the silver inside. And she just did a great job on the carving with it, Monkey Pod. And hopefully it's going to take us to a better spot, take me to a little less chaos.
And I love the subtlety of the lines. And at first I wasn't sure if I should keep them more organic, because you go back and you want it. And then I really started playing with the thick and thin lines, and then some that are a little bit rougher. I did leave because I like how it complements the organic feel of the wood. So it's definitely, this is definitely hand done, which I just love with so many things becoming digital and mass produced. And I very much.
And I think that hand done aspect of how she's done her carving, and it to me is just the most unique and beautiful part of this, is because you see where her hand touched it, you see the grooves, and as you walk around the piece, especially with the silver, you get this different reflection and lighting that happens that would not have happened if it was laser cut or if it was these pristine painted lines, say, on the top. You don't have those little gouges that give this depth to it. And I saw that right off the bat because she does that so well on her, in her painting when she uses thicker oils and so forth. What's too is I think as an artist, any artist, most of the time you're in your studio by yourself, doing your work on your own, beholden to no one and trusting no one but yourself and your vision and your desire for what you're trying to make. And I think in this format, at least how we did this in this one, you know, as we went down to the stupa together, and I just, you know, trust the feeling of that and believe in that calming aspect, especially for me. But then when you turn the piece over to the other artist, because we're not in the same room at the same time, were we there and talked about it? Of course. But then it's, you know, where do you think I should carve it? I go, I don't care. Where do you think I should? I don't care. It's like, it's yours. I've done my part. You go. And it's a matter of being able to metamorphose, or however you want to call it, walk through the portal and just walk away and have complete unblind trust in the person you're working with, because you respect them so much that whatever they do is going to enhance the piece.
I think that's what worked great with us too, because we've had a mutual respect with each other's work for years, for a very long time.
Yeah.
We've known it, we felt comfortable with it, so this was just like, oh, finally, fantastic. But what was fun specifically about this piece is I did kind of sketch as I went. I had an overall idea, but I really, really tried to use the grains of the wood and this beautiful piece of Milo and really play with it how I felt, you know, not too much in the back, let the wood really show in certain areas, and then this is almost like a veil, like her vulnerability kind of coming through, a protection, but very strong, and I think it does. It's strength, it's clarity, and it does. I mean, mind, body, soul is what I try to live by. I really do try to focus on, and just a calming.
And she's beautiful. And we hope everybody comes up and touches the work. It'll make all of her crazy, but.
Yeah, we can always re-oil. We could even add a little bit more paint if need be.
Art that needs love.
There we go.
It's been wonderful working with you.
Loved it.
Let's do it again.
I know. This is, see?
Mwah. Love ya.
I'm a poet and a travel writer, so I have published a dozen books of poetry, 5 books of nonfiction. And normally I have not, as much as I admire Chinese and Japanese poetry, I have not really worked in that form very much, though it's important as a kind of underlying motive in the writing that I do. So I decided that on this occasion, I would go with those traditional Asian forms. This form is very influenced by classical Chinese poetry and also by poetry in the haiku tradition that comes out of Japan. And what it's all about is reticence, saying everything in a very few words. So when I just have the word centuries in the poem that's in the middle of these 3, that would make people think, okay, well, what happened during these centuries? In other words, it throws it back to the reader to work it out.
It was Richard's idea to do like a haiku. And he wanted me to do like Japanese brush painting, which I have done. I took a class in it a long time ago, and so I have the brushes and everything, but it didn't feel like I could get the feeling of the cliffs and the waves coming in as well as if I just painted them directly on canvas. So I started doing, I had photos of these images, and I started doing them, and then I realized I wanted to have an extra space to put the poetry. So that's how I worked out having 2 canvases together. And then my friend Linda Jensen, who does calligraphy, we got together and she did a lot of different samples of the way we wanted to put it on there. But so I just gave her these canvases and she worked it out herself. And Richard decided on how far, what the spacing should be. When we got the first image in our minds, when we went down to the ocean for the first time, we took some photos, but then we decided that we needed to go back again. So we actually went 3 times, to see these sites and to get the feeling of which one we should do. And then I realized, well, this is one cliff and this is the other cliff on the beach. So I had to turn this one around because I decided that these 3 should be, the words should be on the same side. Then Linda came over 2 or 3 times and we worked out how to put it on the page. And then Richard went by himself again down to the ocean after the first time to write the poems down there at the site.
The image came first, not necessarily the image that Suzy painted, but just the image of the cliffs, because the cliffs, you look at these cliffs with the greenery coming down off of them, the ferns, and I think anybody who's familiar with classical Chinese brush painting would be reminded of the kind of cliffs that the Chinese painters did. That was for me, that was the impetus of the whole thing. I think it was Oscar Wilde who said life imitates art, which is kind of a turnaround to what people usually say about art. It's almost as if those paintings didn't exist and one hadn't seen them, then it wouldn't occur to you to think, oh, these cliffs look like classical Chinese art. So that's what got the whole thing going. And I'm glad that Suzy mentioned the word space, because space is really important in this whole project. The spaces between words, how this one ends, big stones out of the volcano shaped by water, centuries. There's a pause, there's a space before the next thing happens. And I think the concept, the reality of space is very important in this collaboration that we did.
This project made me feel like I need to connect with nature more, and especially because we went there first when it was just getting dark and it was kind of wild. These are kind of sweet compared to what the feeling was at the time. It was kind of very dark and misty, and yet that doesn't come through here so much. But that's what made me feel like, why am I not outside? I'd rather just be outside all the time. And so working with Richard, I had to really take his part into consideration. And normally I don't do that. Normally when I paint, I just paint what I want to. Or sometimes I have commissions and I have to paint what other people want. And that's one of the reasons why I came to Hawaii, is so I could paint what I want. So this was interesting for me, again, to have Richard's part, which I really enjoyed that, because it was different. It wasn't like someone telling me I had to paint a certain thing. It was just like I had to incorporate him, his desires and his wishes into my painting. And then with Linda, it was really fun because she's used to doing calligraphy very fancy, and Richard wanted it very plain to go with a haiku feeling of everything plain. So it was, there's 3 people then I had to deal with.
The calligraphy had to be very plain because the style is very plain. the style of that's influenced by Chinese and Japanese poetry, and the painting, Suzy's painting, which is influenced by brush painting. I loved working with Suzy on this project because in our ordinary working life, she's in her studio, I'm in my study. We're doing these two separate things. And I think I learned a lot about the difference between poetry and painting by doing this project. If I were a painter myself, I would be painting landscape. And people have pointed out about my work that landscape is a very important thing in my writing, which is kind of unusual for poetry. And if somebody asked me how long did it take to write these poems, in actual fact, they were very quick. I was reading something about Bob Dylan recently. Leonard Cohen asked him how long it had taken him to write one of his songs. He said 15 minutes. And I felt that had resonance for me because I wrote these poems very quickly. But another answer to that question, how long did it take you to write these poems, would be a lifetime. In other words, you bring a whole lifetime's experience into writing something that maybe takes you 15 minutes. So, whereas Suzy's work took a long time. That's one of the differences between being a poet and being a painter. We hope we've come up with something that's unified, but in terms of how the work was created, our work was very different.
Thinking about the collaboration reaching out show here at Viewpoints, really started with a blank canvas, and I spent some time trying to think who is a non-artist person that I could work with and feel comfortable with and really have a good collaboration with. And it took me a week or more of just kind of wondering who that could be. Steve I had known for some time, and Steve has done some carpentry work for me and had always taken an interest in my work and the process of what I was doing. And I thought, well, okay, we're starting with a blank canvas, but here's a collaborator. So that was the very beginning part. We didn't really have any preconception of what to do, but the one thing that really I wanted to do was follow the reaching out theme. And to me, that was not just reaching out to a person who would be a collaboration person, but also reaching out to new processes and new styles and new things that neither of us had ever done before. So again, it was a blank palette, no preconceived idea of materials, although I do work with copper and silk, and Steve does work with wood, but no preconceived ideas of what to do, except that I wanted it to be something that neither of us had ever done before.
Personally, I've been in home building and construction for many years. So when Jim approached me about starting the project, it was interesting and exciting to try to do something different. My life generally is a hardworking day, and then I lead off into family life and, of course, community service activities. So I volunteer with school and Cub Scouts and Boy Scouting and youth sports. So I've been active in that for many years. And, you know, it brought about something a little different in my life.
One thing that was kind of exciting for me to see was when we first sat down and talked about let's bend some copper and I want to etch it, and originally I thought I was going to put color into this because normally my copper work has some color as well. But when I talked to Steve and we started talking about building these forms and bending and mounting the copper on that, a week later he already had the first model done. So he has a very busy schedule, but stopped everything, went into his garage, and immediately came back with our first working model of a waveform that the copper would be mounted onto.
So when I began making the forms, you know, and we were looking for a typical wood to build off of, and just researching. Solid coal was expensive. So I decided to try a veneer. And we just picked up some plywood forms, shaped it all, and then applied a veneer to the outside for decorative finish, and just something a little more attractive than plywood, of course, but it still has the feel of real wood, and that was more of an organic feel we were looking for as well.
We experimented a little bit, mostly through Steve's idea, of what surface we could use that would sit on top of these wood forms now. Then for me it was creating the images, and I just start with a polished piece of copper, and I paint on it with, well, first we had to cut it to size, and they're 1 foot wide by 41 inches tall. And then I just start painting with a liquid tar, because I'm going to put these into ferric chloride, which you would just think of as an acid that's going to eat into the copper. And so I start painting just with a brush, and I'll paint anything that is here. These raised areas are where I painted the tar to begin with, because when I put it into the acid, the tar will protect it, so it'll just stay shiny copper. And where I haven't painted, it's going to eat away at it. It's going to go into the ferric for 24 hours, rinsing it off every couple of hours. And after that time period, I'll have this deep image etched into the copper itself. I knew I wanted to do a theme about Maui, and a story of Maui, and a storyline of Maui, and the title of the piece is called Storylines. Each panel represents a story of Maui, and so the very first panel, which was the first one that I did, this represents the storms and the trade winds that brought life to the islands. Because without the storms and the winds, the birds would never get here, seeds would never get here. So this was the beginning of life on Maui, as we know it, was bringing plants and animals to the island. This panel here represents the island as it's first breaking out of the ocean. This is the newborn island, erupting Maui, erupting out of the ocean itself and creating a new island. This would be the ocean and the sky as the island is first formed. This bottom area here, to me, represents the early Hawaiians as they first arrived, and they brought agriculture to the island and taro, and started tilling the earth and changing the island itself. This panel here, moving forward, this represents the rainfall that nourishes the island and keeps Maui as wonderful and green as it is. This middle panel represents all the people and cultures that have come here from in the middle of the Pacific and made it a crossroads of the Pacific, and how we all get along as many cultures and societies together. And this represents really going back to nature as big agriculture implodes and folds unto itself, and the land is given back to nature itself, and that's why it's called the storyline. So it starts from the very beginning of Maui, before the island is even here, and the storms and wind are bringing things passing by, as the island is first formed, and now there's something for the seeds to land on, as the Hawaiians got here and started agriculture and the beginning of man. The rainfall that supports us, the people that are here, and finally island going back to nature as it probably was intended to do.
It was really exciting to do something different, challenging. The collaboration effort went well. Jim and I guess, had spoken briefly as going through the process about the potential for doing other works, and I wouldn't mind at all. You become a little enamored with, working and creating something, and, it could be a new direction as I keep moving on.
My hope would be exactly that, and that the reaching out again was reaching out, in my case, to one person. If you touch one person's life, that's the tip of the iceberg. That changes the world. And so our hope is that these are accepted well, and we move forward.